I do have to review epithelial a little bit. So remember from that pre-lab video, there were 6 characteristics of epithelial tissue that made it unique, all right? I want to focus on the first one and the last one, all right? Number 1 and number 6. So there are a lot of cells and a little bit of ECM, right? So when you're looking at epithelial tissue, it's really compact cells. No ECM, that means no protein fibers. All right, so then it's also avascular. It cannot make up its own blood supply, all right? Q, connective tissue, all right? So connective tissue is split into 2 different types, actually. So there's proper and then there's specialized. So we're going to be talking about in lab 6, connective tissue proper. In lab 7, it'll be about specialized. So connective tissue is all types of connective tissue. It's different from epithelial because it is vascular. So connective tissue is always going to be found deep, so under epithelial tissue, because it is the blood supply for that epithelial tissue, all right? So you would have epithelial and then connective, always, all right? And then there's a little amount of cells and a lot of ECM in connective tissue. So when you're focusing on identifying epithelial tissue cells or epithelial tissue types, you're focusing on looking at the cells, the cell shapes, the cell layers, you know, all of that. When you're looking and trying to identify connective tissue, you're really going to be just focusing on the ECM portion. So remember, ECM is made out of ground substance and protein fibers. So if you're only looking at ECM for connective tissue, then you're really going to be just focusing on identifying those protein fibers, all right? All right, so we have connective tissue proper, right? So there was specialized and proper. Proper is then split again into loose and dense, all right? And this loose and dense is really just regarding what the protein fibers, how they're aligned in the connective tissue. So there are 3 different types of loose connective tissue. You again have to write CT or connective tissue. You always have to be specific, and then you always need to say loose, all right? All right. So first one is a loose areolar connective tissue, and this is so pretty. I think this is probably the best view of loose areolar that you will have, all right? So what we can identify here are, you have these pink thick fibers. Those are your collagen fibers, okay? So all of these are really thick pink lines, and they're all haphazardly, loosely thrown about the prep, okay? Then you have dark purple and really thin fibers, all right? So those are all of your elastic fibers, all right? So they have that curly, some wiggliness to them. There's a huge bundle over here that's really wavy and elastic looking. And again, loosely thrown around the slide. And then you have a bunch of purple dots. These purple dots, they don't take up a lot of the prep. Those are your cells, okay? And we need to properly identify these purple dots as fibroblasts, okay? So fibroblasts are the types of cells found here. So when you are given a loose areolar connective tissue prep, it looks like this. You can identify collagen fibers, you can identify elastic fibers, you can identify fibroblasts. You can tell me that this is loose areolar connective tissue, and you can also tell me where it's located, which is deep to all epithelial tissue. That's where loose areolar connective tissue is, all right? I told you that connective tissue was always under epithelial because it was its blood supply. Well, specifically, it's always loose areolar, okay? All right. Next up, we have loose adipose connective tissue. Now, this is your fat. This tissue is fat, all right? So the location, you would say visceral fat. It is found on all organs, all muscles, anywhere in the body, it is fat, all right? So when you're looking at a tissue prep of loose adipose connective tissue, you're gonna have all of these clear spaces, all right? Now these are not lumens. The pink isn't the cell touching a lumen, all right? This white portion is actually the cell, which we call adipocytes, okay? Loose adipose connective tissue has adipocytes as the cells. Please do not call them fat cells. We are in anatomy class and we use anatomically correct naming. All right, so all of these are your adipocytes. You can see along the edge there are these little darker figures. They're very smushed. Those are the nuclei of those adipocytes, okay? All right. Then you have loose reticular connective tissue. So this tissue, actually, instead of purple dots, we have pink dots everywhere, all right? So those pink cells are referred to as lymphocytes or immune cells, okay? So this is the only tissue with pink cells, okay? And it's also the only tissue with reticular fibers. Now I know these reticular fibers probably look way more squiggly, way darker, and way more crazy than elastic fibers did in loose areolar connective tissue. Yeah, but they're not. They're reticular. They have to be reticular because they are found with the pink dots, and the pink dots are lymphocytes, and lymphocytes are only in loose reticular connective tissue, and loose reticular connective tissue is the only one with reticular fibers. So that's how it works. Now you may see some slides that have all of those pink lymphocytes everywhere, right? But now the fibers are blue. I don't know why, but they're still reticular fibers, and we know that because of the pink dots, all right? Some preps may even just have pink dots and no fibers at all. But because it's pink dots, we know it's lymphocytes, which means it's loose reticular connective tissue. Loose reticular connective tissue is found in the lymph nodes and in the spleen. All right, so that wraps it up for loose. Now we're into dense. All right, so all of those fibers for the loose connective tissue, they were all thrown haphazardly around. Now we're going to have dense, thick fibers, all right? And those dense fibers are either going to be classified as regular or irregular, all right? So, regular dense fibers in dense, regular collagenous connective tissue. You do not really need to say collagenous, that's a little bit extra. So this right here, all of this pink, we know that pink means collagen fibers, all right? So it's all nice, it's densely packed, and it's regular in that its pattern, the way that it's aligned, is nice and parallel, all right? We also have purple dots, and purple dots means fibroblasts. So I can ask you what the cell type is, you'd say fibroblast, and I can ask you what the protein fiber is, and you would say collagen. The location for dense regular collagenous connective tissue is found in your tendons and ligaments, all right? So that makes a lot of sense because if you think about your tendons and ligaments, would you want your collagen fibers, the makeup of the tissue, to be haphazardly thrown around in chaoticness or loosely? No, you want it dense, you want it thick, you want it organized so that you can have some tensile strength within your tendons and ligaments. All right, so next you have dense, regular, elastic connective tissue. So it's still nicely dense, packed, parallel, organized fibers, but instead we have wavy, crazy, elastic fibers, all right? There are still fibroblasts. You can see those purple dots, but now you have all those purple fibers. Purple is elastic, all right? Lastly, you have dense, irregular connective tissue. So, irregular, so it's no longer parallel patterns, it's now haphazard again, but the bundles are still thickly packed, okay? Because it's still dense. So, dense irregular connective tissue is found in the dermis of the skin, which we're going to go over in another video when we go over the integumentary system. It's usually stained pink. This is a weird photo, but sometimes this is what it looks like. It just depends, all right? So, wherever these white portions are that you're kind of seeing. They kind of look like barrier islands or like a wavy bacon fat pattern, something like that. Those are typically pink because these are collagen fibers, okay? So dense irregular connective tissue has densely packed, chaotically thrown collagen fiber bundles, all right? And it does still have fibroblasts, which you can see, purple dots, all right? And it's located within the skin, specifically the dermis, but we'll get even more specific in a different video, all right? So you have proper versus specialized. Proper then gets split into dense versus loose, and dense gets split into regular versus irregular, all right? So it's a nice little hierarchy, little umbrella, pyramid, falling pattern. I'm gonna cut it.